The low hum of the Gala's conversations was a constant buzz in my ears, a sound as predictable as the clink of baccarat crystal against sterling silver. I smiled, or at least my facial muscles executed the precise movement required. Smiling was my role in this grand performance. The perfect fiancé to Julian Montgomery, the flawless daughter of the Kensingtons, the ideal future wife destined to seal a corporate merger that thoroughly satisfied both families, especially my mother, Evelyn, whose greatest pride was our ironclad standing in Manhattan's upper crust. "Vivienne, darling, you look absolutely radiant," my mother said, smoothing an invisible crease on my midnight blue silk gown. Her scrutinizing gaze, as always, searched for flaws. "Julian hasn't taken his eyes off you all night." I followed her gaze. Julian, impeccable in his tailored tuxedo, was chatting animatedly with a group of his father's potential investors near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-dusted terrace. He smiled that broad, blindingly white smile that had completely captivated my mother. Such an ambitious young man, and with such impeccable manners, she always said. For the 2 years of our engagement, I had convinced myself that his ambition was synonymous with determination, and his manners with kindness. Now, in this ballroom filled with heavy perfumes and jewelry that cost more than half the real estate in the Midwest, that certainty was beginning to crack like the thin ice in my champagne flute. "Of course, Mother," I replied, draining my glass a little more. The bubbling liquid burned a cold trail down to my stomach. Always so attentive. "Don't drink too much, sweetie," she whispered with a tense smile. "We still have a long night of receiving guests. The Vanderbilts just arrived." I nodded. Receive, smile, thank them. Happy winter solstice. I felt like an antique porcelain vase placed on a mantelpiece just to be admired completely immobile. The energy belonged to everyone else, especially to Julian, who was now excusing himself with a smooth gesture, pulling out his phone, and slipping out toward the terrace. Something urgent. Undoubtedly, always something urgent. "I'm going to get some air, Mother. I won't be long." The air on the terrace was freezing, biting, a welcome shock after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. But I wasn't alone. In the shadows, just beyond the golden light spilling through the French doors, I saw 2 silhouettes standing very close together. I recognized the line of Julian's back instantly, the cut of the tuxedo I had helped him choose. The other silhouette belonged to a scarlet-red dress that screamed into the night. It was Valerie Thorne, the daughter of a major new shareholder in Montgomery Holdings. We had dined with them just last week. Julian had praised her for her sharp vision of the Asian markets. I didn't move. It was as if my stilettos had fused with the stone of the terrace. I watched. This wasn't a business conversation. The distance between them was non-existent. Julian's hand, the hand that supposedly held mine with tenderness, was resting low on Valerie's waist. An intimate, possessive gesture. She laughed, a low, honeyed sound that the wind carried to me in jagged pieces. He tilted his head. His lips moved near her ear, and then he kissed her. Not a stolen or timid kiss. A deep, slow kiss, filled with a familiarity that stabbed me right in the center of my chest. The buzz of the ballroom extinguished. There was only the sound of the freezing wind and the wild, painful beating of my own blood in my ears. There were no immediate tears. There was a void, a cold more intense than the February night. Then came a wave of heat, of rage, so pure and scorching it nearly doubled me over. It wasn't the pain of betrayed love, because in that moment, I realized I had never truly loved him. It was the rage of the fool, the rage of someone who had been a complicit warden in her own gilded cage. Rage against my mother, against expectations, against Julian and his lying smile, and against myself for having allowed it. My eyes, clouded by fury, swept the terrace. I needed something, an exit, a way to strike back, to shatter this moment into 1,000 pieces and drive them into his hypocritical face. Then I saw him, a lone man, leaning against the balustrade at the far end, oblivious to the drama. He was tall, with a broad, defined silhouette even under his dark overcoat. He was gazing out at the city, his sharp profile silhouetted against the glittering skyline of New York. A complete stranger. Perfect. I didn't think. The rage thought for me. I walked toward him, my heels making a decisive, sharp sound against the stone. He must have heard me because he turned his head slightly. His eyes, in the shadows, looked like two fragments of dense darkness. There was no curiosity in them, only a cold, distant evaluation. Yes? His voice was a deep baritone that resonated despite the howling wind. I didn't answer. I stepped right in front of him, so close I could catch the faint scent of leather and something clean and cold, like earth after a heavy rain. I saw a flash of surprise in his eyes. Then I acted. I put my hands on his broad shoulders, rose on the tips of my toes, and pressed my lips hard against his. It was a bruising, desperate kiss, a seal of fury and vengeance. His lips were still. Shocked, I forced the spectacle, the scandal. Panting, I broke the kiss and spun around toward the ballroom doors, just as Julian and Valerie broke apart abruptly. Their faces were masks of pure stupefaction. With all the strength I could muster, my voice trembling not from fear but from pure, poisoned adrenaline, I called out, "Darling, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." I locked eyes with Julian and added with venomous sweetness, "Forgive me for leaving you alone, my love. But my husband and I had to discuss a detail regarding our honeymoon." The word husband dropped onto the patio like a live grenade. The murmur of the guests lingering near the terrace doors cut off instantly. I felt dozens of eyes drilling into us. I felt Julian's burning, stunned glare, and I felt the body of the stranger behind me tense like a coiled steel spring. Julian lunged toward us. His elegance had vanished. His face was congested, a grotesque mask of wrath and humiliation. "What the hell is this, Vivienne?" he hissed furiously. "Who is this? This guy? Husband? Are you insane?" Valerie, as pale as her dress was bright, took a step back, melting into the crowd of onlookers. I took a deep breath, holding Julian's gaze. The rage gave me a strange, crystalline clarity. Perfect, I thought. Let it all burn. Before I could answer, I felt a heavy arm, solid as a stone wall, wrap around my waist. The stranger pulled me flush against his side. The movement was so natural and possessive it left me breathless. He didn't let go. His heat, his firmness, it was a brutal contrast to the void I had felt minutes earlier. Then, he spoke. His deep voice didn't rise. It was calm, clear, and it sliced through the charged air like a scalpel. "It seems, Mr. Montgomery, that your fiancé prefers my company," he said, his tone dripping with glacial irony, a preference that, frankly, I am beginning to understand. Julian blinked, totally disoriented. He hadn't expected that calm, that crushing authority. "Who the hell do you think you are? Let go of her right now. This is an insult. A farce." "The farce," the man replied, and for the first time, his voice carried a lethal edge, "was the one you were performing in the dark with Miss Thorne. Isn't that right?" His gaze, now visible under the light spilling from the ballroom, rested briefly on Valerie, who looked ready to sink into the floorboards. "As for who I am, that is the least of your concerns. It is enough that he squeezed my waist slightly, calls me whatever she likes." Julian's face was a poem of impotent fury. He stammered, searching for a comeback that never arrived. The audience murmured. I heard my mother's shrill, "Oh my God," from somewhere behind me. The world had shrunk to this triangle on the freezing terrace. Julian absolutely livid. Me, trembling inside but rigid as a statue. And the stranger, the only point of calm in the hurricane I had unleashed. Suddenly, the initial euphoria vanished, leaving a bitter, freezing aftertaste. What had I done? I had thrown myself into the arms of a complete stranger, a man whose gaze I could now feel burning the side of my profile, a gaze that was no longer just cold, but intensely calculating. I had burned my bridges in front of all of New York high society, in front of my family. For the first time, fear, a sharp, rational fear, began to seep through the cracks of my rage. The party was ruined. The whispers grew louder. Julian, seeing he couldn't win this moment, shot a look of pure hatred at me, and then at the man holding me. "This isn't over, Vivienne," he growled. "You're going to regret this pathetic stunt." He spun on his heel and stormed off, dragging a humiliated Valerie with him. The spectacle was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The arm around my waist relaxed, but didn't release me. He guided me firmly, but without roughness, away from the prying eyes, toward a darker, secluded corner of the terrace. Away from the doors, the noise of the ballroom muffled once again. He let me go. I turned to look him in the face, truly look at him for the first time. He had dark gray eyes, almost black in the moonlight, framed by thick lashes that any woman would envy. His face was hard, angular, with a strong jaw and a firm line of thin lips. He wasn't conventionally handsome. He was striking, imposing. Who are you? I managed to stammer, my voice barely a whisper. A minimal smile that didn't reach those icy eyes curved his lips. You just saved me the introduction. I'm your husband, apparently. His tone was curiously soft now, but loaded with an intent that chilled my blood. For tonight, at least. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. I started, panic rising in my throat. It was a mistake, a moment of madness, a very public moment of madness, he interrupted. His eyes swept over me, from my perfectly styled hair that must now be slightly undone, down to the blue silk gown, evaluating, measuring, and mistakes, Miss Kensington, have consequences. He knew my name. Of course he knew it. Everyone at this gala knew it. What do you want? I asked, trying to make my voice sound firm and failing miserably. He leaned in slightly. His breath brushed my ear as he spoke, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. His words, pronounced in a low, deliberate whisper, branded themselves into my mind. The next time you use my name, make sure you know exactly who I am. He straightened up, gave me one last inscrutable look, and walked away with long, silent strides, disappearing into the shadows of the terrace as if he had never been there, like a ghost I had conjured in my madness. I stood there trembling, hugging myself. The winter chill penetrated to my bones. From the ballroom, the jazz band and the laughter continued to flow, an absurd soundtrack to the shipwreck of my life. I had wanted to set Julian's world on fire, and I had done it. But the flames were already reaching me too. And amidst the chaos, the only certainty was the echo of that deep voice and the veiled threat in his words. Who was that man? And above all, what was he going to do with me now? The days following the gala were a long, tortuous descent into the hell of public gossip. My phone, after an initial hour of sepulchral silence, erupted into a crescendo of notifications, missed calls, and messages I didn't dare open. I only read the fragments on the lock screen. Vivienne, is it true? I can't believe what they're saying. Your mother is beside herself. Julian is telling everyone you were drunk. Drunk. An outburst. Small words attempting to tame a wild scandal. I locked myself in my Tribeca loft with the blinds drawn, like a leper. The noble burning rage from the terrace had turned to cold, sticky ash. Shame. Not for what I had done, but for having done it so publicly, so stupidly. I had handed my family and Julian the role of the victim on a silver platter. The first assault came from my mother. She arrived unannounced, carrying herself like a Roman empress en route to her martyrdom. Her expensive perfume, usually a halo of elegance, smelled of gunpowder today. Do you have any remote idea of what you have done? Her voice was a trembling blade, vibrating not with concern, but with contained wrath. Your father has been putting out fires since before breakfast. The Montgomerys are furious. Furious, Vivienne. Julian is devastated. He says it was a misunderstanding with that Thorne girl. A moment of weakness. But that you humiliated him in the most grotesque way with a nobody, a gangster, according to some. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mother, I said, my voice raspy from disuse. I saw them. They were kissing. And that nobody. I don't even know who he was. That makes it even worse. She exploded, losing the last shreds of her composure. You throw yourself into the arms of a stranger. You call him your husband. You are completely unhinged. Your reputation, our reputation, is shattered. There is only one way to fix this. I already knew. I saw it drawn in her eyes, hard as agate. No, I said, sounding firmer than I felt. Vivienne, I will not marry Julian. I can't, and I won't. What he did was a betrayal. And even if it wasn't, it's done. I blurted out in the middle of the living room. There's no going back. Her expression morphed from fury to icy contempt. You are a selfish little girl. A girl who doesn't think about her family. Julian is willing to forgive your pathetic spectacle. He is a magnanimous man. It's clear you don't deserve him. But the merger of our families, I am not a bargaining chip. I interrupted, standing up. A new tremor, this time of determination, coursed through my veins. The vision of Julian and Valerie, the subsequent humiliation, the coldness of the stranger, it all amalgamated into a visceral rejection. Tell the Montgomerys whatever you want. Tell the whole Upper East Side that I'm crazy, a drunk, a tramp. But you will never see me on my knees begging that liar for forgiveness. Evelyn looked at me as if I had sprouted a second head. Very well, she finally said, her voice glacial. If that is your decision, bear the consequences. Don't expect this family to clean up your messes. And that individual you paraded yourself with? Rumors are already flying. Dominic Blackwood. A dangerous man, Vivienne. From a complicated family, you ruin your future with a decent man to ally yourself with a wolf. May God help you. She left, leaving behind a silence heavy with ultimatums. Dominic Blackwood. The name echoed in my head. I had heard it before. In hushed conversations between my father and his partners, always spoken with a tone of respect, mixed with profound caution. The heir to the Blackwood Empire. Don't play games with him. A cold mastermind. A wolf. My mother was probably right, and I, in my stupidity, had bared my neck to him. Julian's call came at dusk. He didn't use my name. Happy? His voice was honeyed poison. You've managed to make all of Manhattan point at me as the pathetic cuckold and at you as the hysterical, scorned ex. A great deal for everyone. It didn't have to be a deal, Julian. You just had to be faithful, or at least discreet. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Faithfulness is a very rigid concept, darling. And you broke the discretion when you decided to put on your little soap opera stunt with Blackwood, of all people. Do you know what they say about him? He ruins people for sport. What did he offer you? Money? Thrills? He's going to use you and throw you away like a rag. And when he's done, you'll have nowhere to go. Neither I nor your family will take you back. You'll be Blackwood's crazy whore, and then, an outcast. He hung up. His words were designed to wound, and they did exactly that because they carried the venom of plausible truth. What did I know about Dominic Blackwood? Nothing, except the hardness of his eyes and the threat in his whisper. I had burned my ships, and now I was adrift in the open sea, at the mercy of an unknown and probably hostile captain. My only lifeline was Zoe. She showed up with a greasy bag of burgers and a bottle of cheap red wine, the perfect antidote to the poisoned pomp of my world. Girl, the other night was epic, she declared, pouring the wine into water glasses. I saw Julian's face, and I thought he was going to have a stroke. A fucking masterpiece. It's a disaster, Zoe, I sighed, but a small smile touched my lips. Her irreverence was a balm. My mother has morally disinherited me. Julian is threatening to leave me out on the street, and the mysterious husband turns out to be Dominic Blackwood, who apparently is the devil himself. Better the devil you know than Julian the saint, she retorted, taking a huge bite of her burger. The Blackwoods are in another league, honey. True old money. And Dominic. Well, he's a serious guy. Very serious. He doesn't play games. If he got involved in your mess, it was for a reason, not out of charity. Why then? I asked, desperate for a shred of logic. I don't know. But one thing is clear. Throwing yourself at Julian Montgomery's throat in public isn't something you do without consequences. Blackwood knew what he was getting into. Did he use me for something? Or, she looked at me with curiosity. He genuinely liked you. Please, I grumbled. It was 1 second. A kiss born of rage. He didn't even know me. The kiss was yours, Zoe pointed out, perceptive as always. The play, the response that was his. He took control. A man like him doesn't lose control. He had it all calculated. That idea terrified me even more. Calculated? Was it possible? No, it couldn't be. He didn't even know me. Unless he did. His last sentence returned to me. Make sure you know exactly who I am. Was it a threat or a warning? The answer arrived the next day. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a thick, heavy parchment envelope, hand-delivered by a young man with an impassive face to the doorman of my building. Inside was a sober business card, no flourishes, just a name, Dominic Blackwood. And underneath, an address on Park Avenue and a handwritten time in blue ink, 5 p.m. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. Panic tried to take hold of me. Zoe urged me not to go. My pride told me to ignore the man, but realism, that cold realism beginning to rise from the ashes of my old life, told me that running away would be the worst move. He held something, whatever it was, and I had nothing left to lose except the remnants of my dignity. I needed to know what game he was playing. I needed to regain, even if just a sliver, some control. At 4:55 p.m., I stood in front of a discreet but imposing limestone building. There were no visible plaques, just an intercom. I buzzed. The door opened with a soft hum. The interior was the exact opposite of the bourgeois warmth of my parents' home or the ostentation of the Montgomerys. It was modern, minimalist, freezing, steel, glass, dark wood. The silence was absolute, broken only by the click of my heels on the marble floor. A panoramic elevator took me to the top floor. The doors opened directly into a vast corner office with a spectacular view of the Manhattan skyline. And there, with his back to me, contemplating the city, was him, Dominic Blackwood. He turned slowly. The late afternoon light hit him head-on, outlining that broad, powerful frame. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo jacket today, but a dark gray bespoke suit that fit his body like a second skin. His face was even harder in the daylight. Implacable. Punctual, he said. His voice was the same, deep, unhurried, loaded with a natural authority that filled the room. I'm glad. Sit. It wasn't a suggestion. I walked to one of the leather chairs facing his monumental solid wood desk. Feeling like a student summoned to the principal, I sat down, trying not to look intimidated. He took the seat across from me, folding his hands on the desk. His eyes, those steel-gray eyes, scrutinized me mercilessly. Your situation is untenable, he began, without any pleasantries. The Montgomerys are trying to spin your outburst as a nervous breakdown to safeguard their image and keep the engagement intact as if nothing happened. Your mother is on their side. Your father is more pragmatic. But the social pressure is immense. Julian, for his part, is furious. And a furious Julian is a dangerous Julian. He will try to quietly ruin you, and if he can, damage your family's interests to force a reconciliation or simply for revenge. Hearing my life dissected with such precision and coldness was terrifying. And how do you know all this? I asked, a single eyebrow raising a millimeter. It is my business to know things, and in this case, the disaster is partially mine. Your kiss dragged me into your soap opera, Vivienne, and I am not a fan of cheap drama. I'm sorry, I muttered, and I hated the weakness in my voice. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to involve you. But you did. And now we are here, he said, leaning back in his chair. You have two options. The first. Go back to Julian. Humiliate yourself. Accept his version of events. And live the rest of your life as the decorative wife of a man you despise, who will cheat on you at every opportunity. Your family will forgive you. Society will forget until the next scandal. He described it with an accuracy that made me shudder. It was a photograph of my future. A future dead inside. And the second? I asked, almost out of breath. The second, he continued, and for the first time I saw a flash of something in his eyes, something not cold, but intensely calculating, is that we continue the farce. I blinked. What? That we? Pretend to be a couple? Or at least, that the world believes it. A fiery, impetuous romance born from a spark in the middle of a scandal. You broke up with your boring, treacherous fiancé for a man who is actually worth your time. A story that New York high society can digest. A narrative that, conveniently fed, would leave Julian Montgomery looking exactly like what he is, an opportunist who lost an extraordinary woman because of his own stupidity. My jaw dropped. You are proposing we fake a relationship. Fake is a very strong word. It's a transaction. I offer you cover, protection, my name, my influence. They are a shield against Julian and the social vultures. In return, you offer me your presence. You will attend the events I indicate by my side. You will be charming, discreet, and maintain the facade of a happily in love woman for a period of time. A period of time, I repeated, dazed. Why? What do you gain from this? I don't believe it's out of charity. A minimal, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. No, it's not charity. Julian Montgomery and his family have been trying to muscle into several business deals that interest me, using rather inelegant methods. Your little rebellion handed me a public advantage over him. Humiliating him was satisfactory. Keeping him humiliated while you flourish at my side would be strategically advantageous. Furthermore, his gaze fixed on me, penetrating. A stable female presence at my side calms certain speculations on my family's board of directors. It makes them believe I'm settling down. It was cynical. It was cold. It was probably dangerous. But it was also logical. And it was an exit that didn't involve kneeling before Julian. It's a pact with the devil, I whispered, more to myself than to him. He shrugged slightly. The devil, in this case, is offering you a safe conduct pass. Julian and your mother are offering you a life sentence. You choose. My mind was a whirlwind. On one hand, the fear of this man, of his unknown and harsh world. On the other, the visceral disgust at going back to the gilded cage. Zoe was right. He was calculating. But I could be too. And what if, over time, I want to end this transaction? I asked, lifting my chin. When I have neutralized Julian and you have rebuilt your social standing on your own terms, the farce ends, he said with surprising frankness. No debts, no resentments, a mutual, thank you for your services. It sounded too good to be true. And what prevents me from accepting your protection and then simply vanishing? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. His gaze became even more intense, almost physical. Because I am not a man who breaks his word, Vivienne, and because if you accept, you will sign a highly detailed non-disclosure agreement. Breaking it would have unpleasant consequences for your family's fragile empire. It is not a threat, he added, seeing my expression. It is a fact. In my world, things are put in writing. I took a deep breath. The air in the office felt scarce. There was the crossroads, the familiar chain, or a leap into the void with a stranger offering a steel parachute. Why me? I asked one last time, searching his eyes for some crack, some real emotion. You could choose anyone for this farce. He remained silent for a few seconds, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. Because you chose me, he finally said. And his tone had a strange, almost personal resonance. In the midst of your chaos, you saw something in me that gave you courage. Or desperation. It doesn't matter. It's a start. And why? I pressed, something that seemed out of place for him, because I prefer an accomplice with fire inside, even reckless fire, to a well-trained puppet. His words, the last part, especially reached me in an unexpected way. Fire inside. No one in my entire life had seen anything like that in me. Not Julian, not my mother. To them, I was cold porcelain, an ornament. I looked Dominic Blackwood in the eyes, those gray eyes that saw everything. I saw the danger, I saw the calculation, but I also saw or wanted to see a flash of respect. A flash that was worth more than all of Julian's condescension. I took a breath, feeling the fear slowly transforming into a cold, new determination. I had already burned my ships. Now, at least, I would choose the vessel I sailed in. Agreed, I said, my voice ringing clear and stronger than I expected. I accept your transaction. He nodded. Just once. There was no smile of triumph, only serene acceptance. Good. My lawyers will prepare the documents. We start tomorrow. I will pick you up at 8 for dinner at the Union Club, dressed to impress. It will be our debut. He stood up, indicating the meeting was over. I stood up too, my legs slightly shaky. When I reached the door, I turned back. Mr. Blackwood, one more thing. On the terrace. You said, the next time you use my name, make sure you know exactly who I am. You knew it. You knew who I was. Before. All of that. He had turned back to look out the window, his silhouette cutting against the New York sky. He didn't turn around. That, Vivienne, he replied, his voice reaching me as if from far away, is something you will discover for yourself. Consider it the first unwritten clause of our pact. I left the office and stepped out onto Park Avenue with my heart pounding. I had signed a pact with a man who was probably a wolf, but for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel like a sheep. I felt like someone who had just taken the reins of her own disaster. With fear, yes, but with the reins, at last. The days that followed my signature in that freezing Park Avenue office transformed into a succession of precise instructions delivered by an assistant named Sloane, whose efficiency was as cold as the glass of the skyscrapers. A dress for the dinner at the Union Club. Shoes. An appointment at a high-end Fifth Avenue salon where they were waiting for me without a reservation. Everything was impeccable, exorbitantly expensive, and entirely devoid of human warmth. It was like being a mannequin dressed for a play, the play of being Dominic Blackwood's new companion. The night of the debut, a silent black town car picked me up at 8 o'clock sharp. Dominic wasn't driving. It was an impassive-faced chauffeur. When we arrived at the club, an exclusive institution where Manhattan's power was served on silver platters, Dominic was already there, waiting in the grand lobby. He watched me step out of the car, and his eyes, under the glow of the chandelier, made a rapid sweep over my figure. From my sophisticated updo to my stiletto heels. There was neither approval nor disapproval in his gaze, just the evaluation of a general inspecting his troops. Adequate was his only comment before offering me his arm. His touch was firm, impersonal. We walked toward the main dining room, and I felt dozens of eyes lock onto us. Whispers died down as we passed. Curious smiles appeared, others malicious. It was exactly what he wanted, to be the center of attention. During dinner, Dominic was the personification of courteous but distant attention. He asked about my study's art history, a major my mother considered a useless whim. He asked for my opinions on a recent exhibit at the MoMA, and even about my taste for vintage jazz. His questions were intelligent, direct, and demanded equally thoughtful answers. There were no platitudes, no empty gallantries. It was a job interview disguised as a romantic dinner. You should smile more, he told me at one point, cutting his filet mignon with surgical precision. But not the way you did with Montgomery. Not that empty window display smile. Smile as if you know a secret that no one else in this room knows. And what is that secret, I asked, trying to play along? That you are with me by your own choice, and that it amuses you, he replied, bringing the fork to his mouth. People adore a story of passion. Emit passion. Or at least its appearance. That was when I saw him. Across the room, at a table near the window, sat Julian. He wasn't alone. He was with his father, William Montgomery, and a couple of other grave-looking men. Julian saw us instantly. His business smile froze, decomposing into a grimace of pure hatred he didn't even try to hide. His father followed his gaze, and his expression turned glacial. Dominic kept eating, imperturbable. Don't look at him, he said softly, without taking his eyes off his plate. Look at me. And laugh. I did as he asked. I forced a laugh, leaning a bit toward him as if he had said something tremendously witty. I placed a hand on his forearm, over the fine wool of his suit. The muscle underneath was hard as rock. He didn't flinch, but he turned his hand over and wrapped his long fingers around mine. His skin was warm, dry. The contact was electrifying, not from pleasure, but from the sheer intensity of the act, the forced complicity. From the corner of my eye, I saw Julian gripping his wine glass so tightly I feared it would shatter in his hand. Very well, Dominic murmured, and for a second his fingers squeezed mine slightly before letting go. Now, ignore him completely. The rest of the dinner passed under the palpable tension of Julian's glare burning the back of our necks. Dominic, however, seemed entirely oblivious. He talked about architecture, wine, a historic restoration project in Newport. He was cultured, eloquent, and totally impenetrable. When we stood up to leave, Julian planted himself in our path. He smelled of rage and cheap brandy. Blackwood, he spat, the name sounding like an insult. What a coincidence seeing you here. Montgomery. Dominic nodded with the same coldness one uses to discuss the weather. It's no coincidence. I'm a board member here. And now, if you'll excuse us, I'm going to take Vivienne home. My fiancé, Julian snapped, raising his voice. A few heads turned. Dominic smiled, a small, dangerous smile. I believe you are confused. Miss Kensington ended her engagement to you rather publicly and definitively. Or at least, that is what all of New York understood when they saw you with Miss Thorne glued to your lips. His tone was conversational, but every word was a whip crack. Now, she is with me, and I prefer not to repeat myself. This isn't over, Julian scoffed, turning to me, ignoring Dominic. Vivienne, this guy is using you. He's a ruthless animal. When he's done with you, you'll have nowhere to go. Before I could answer, Dominic took a step forward, placing himself slightly between Julian and me. He didn't make a threatening gesture, but his mere presence, his height, his aura of absolute control, made Julian step back involuntarily. The only animal here, Montgomery, is the one harassing a woman who has made it abundantly clear she wants nothing to do with him, Dominic said, his voice dropping a register, becoming even more lethal. If you ever approach her again, if you speak a word to her, if you even look at her in a way I do not like, you won't just end up the laughingstock of Manhattan. You will end up ruined. And I say this without malice, merely as a statement of fact. Now get out of my sight. Julian paled. Fury and fear fought on his face. He looked at his father, who was watching from the table with a grim expression but wasn't moving to intervene. William Montgomery was no match for Dominic Blackwood. And he knew it. With one last spiteful glare at me, Julian turned and walked away, defeated. In the town car heading back, the silence was thick. I was trembling inside a mix of adrenaline, rage, and something that felt far too much like relief. You shouldn't have threatened him like that, I said finally, breaking the silence. He's vindictive. It wasn't a threat, Dominic corrected, looking out the window at the passing city lights. It was a prediction, and predictions, when they come from me, tend to come true. Why? I asked, turning toward him. Why this hatred for Julian? This goes beyond our transaction. He turned slowly. The streetlights played across his face, casting deep shadows. The Montgomerys tried to ruin a close friend of mine years ago. A dirty deal. My friend lost almost everything. Julian was just a kid then, but he learned his father's lessons well. They are social climbers, Vivienne. And climbers, when they aren't stopped in time, try to step on your neck. It's time he learned his place. There was truth in his words, a cold conviction that admitted no argument. But there was also something else, something personal. It wasn't just business. And am I just a way to stop him? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me for a long moment. At first, yes, he admitted with brutal honesty. Now, you are an interesting variable. I didn't know how to respond. An interesting variable, that was all. A piece in his game against Julian that had turned out to have more edges than expected. The following days were a series of carefully choreographed events. Lunches at trendy midtown restaurants where society columnists just happened to spot us. Sunday morning strolls through Central Park. Dominic even showed up one afternoon at the art gallery in Chelsea where I worked irregularly, another whim my mother despised, causing excited whispers among my coworkers. Every gesture was calculated. The hand on the small of my back, the casual brush of his fingers as he passed the salt, the gaze that lingered on me a second longer than necessary. To the outside world, we were the new it couple, fiery and unexpected. But in private, the distance was abysmal. Conversations revolved around strategy, public appearances, how to handle my family. My father was increasingly intrigued. My mother, increasingly furious. Until the gifts started arriving. They weren't the vulgar jewels or ostentatious flower arrangements Julian used to send to apologize after one of his absences. They were specific, rare things. A vintage, out-of-print first edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, one of my favorite works from college that I had mentioned in passing exactly once. A box of pralines, not just any brand, but from a tiny historic confectionery in the French Quarter, the exact kind my grandmother used to bring me from New Orleans when I was a little girl. A limited edition vinyl record of Miles Davis that was virtually impossible to find. Every gift arrived without a card, without explanation. They just appeared with the doorman of my building or were delivered by a discreet courier. They completely threw me off balance. How did he know these things? Background checks were one thing, but this was personal. Too personal. He's playing with you, Zoe warned me as we examined the Whitman book in my living room. He's a control freak. He wants to show you that he knows everything about you, that he can reach parts of you that even you don't remember. It's terrifying. Or he's trying to connect, I murmured, running my fingers over the yellowed pages. Terrifying was the right word, but there was also something strangely moving in the precision of those gestures. The turning point came with an invitation to a private charity auction at the Frick Collection, a high society event where only the absolute elite gathered. Julian, of course, would be there with his family. It's time, Dominic told me on the phone the morning of the event, to set the record straight once and for all. He sent me a dress. Not the typical black gala gown. It was a deep, intense crimson-red pure silk, with a cut that was simultaneously modest and devastatingly sensual. It was a dress that declared war, and I put it on like armor. Dominic picked me up personally. When he saw me, his eyes widened for a fraction of a second. It was his first genuine, uncalculated reaction. "You look perfect," he said. And this time, the word sounded like more than an evaluation. The auction was a torture of fake smiles and murderous glares. The Montgomerys ostentatiously ignored us, but the tension was palpable. It was during the cocktail hour afterward, surrounded by centuries-old paintings and polite murmurs, that Julian, with one too many drinks giving him liquid courage, finally approached. His father tried to stop him, but it was useless. "Vivienne," he said, his voice a bit slurred. "How colorful. Red suits you. You always were one for the dramatics." Before I could answer, Dominic appeared at my side, his presence a physical barrier. "Montgomery," he greeted dismissively. "Still drinking the dregs at the bar? Some things never change." Julian ignored him, locking his bloodshot eyes on me. "Do you know what they say about him? That his family made their fortune with less than holy methods. That his father was found floating in the East River. Shady business. You, who were always so delicate, mixed up with this trash." "That's enough, Julian," I said, finding my voice. It didn't tremble anymore. "You have no right to judge anyone, least of all me. Right?" He spat. "I have every right. 2 years, Vivienne. 2 years I groomed you to be my wife. I polished you, introduced you to the right people, and you pay me back by throwing yourself into the arms of the first rich mobster who smiles at you. It's pathetic." That was when Dominic spoke. Not to Julian, to me, but loud enough for the circle of curious onlookers around us to hear. "Do you remember, darling?" he said, his voice low but clear as crystal. "That night in New Orleans, Mardi Gras, it was unusually cold. You, in that striking emerald green vintage dress, you saved me from a mess with some drunk frat boys who wanted to jump me in an alley. You told them to back off, pretending I was your awkward cousin fresh off the bus from Ohio, terrified and clueless." He paused, and a genuine, warm smile lit up his face, transforming it completely. "The funniest part is that I was from New York, and I was far from terrified. But the way you stood in front of them, spinning those convincing lies, I knew right then that you were someone incredibly special." The air left my lungs. New Orleans, Mardi Gras. I was 18 years old, a college trip with girlfriends. I vaguely remembered a chaotic night, a group of obnoxious, drunk college guys picking a fight, and an older, quiet guy in a leather jacket who looked entirely out of place. I, drunk on rebellion and hurricanes, had intervened, inventing a ridiculous story to pull him out of there. It was him, that taciturn guy with the intense stare. It was Dominic Blackwood. I looked at Dominic, searching his eyes for any sign of a lie. I saw only profound certainty, and something else, an ancient tenderness, kept under lock and key for years. Julian was staring at us, dumbfounded, trying to process the scene. New Orleans? He stammered. What? From a time when Vivienne was already capable of distinguishing a man from a boy, Dominic said, turning his gaze back to Julian. The tenderness vanished, replaced by glacial disdain. A lesson you, apparently, never learned. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a donation to make. He took my hand not possessively, but with a softness that disarmed me and led me away, leaving Julian planted there, jaw slack and defeated in a way no threat could have ever achieved. In the car ride home, the silence was different. It was no longer uncomfortable. It was charged. Electric. I couldn't look away from his profile, illuminated by the city lights. It was you? I asked finally, my voice barely a whisper. That guy in the French Quarter. The one in the leather jacket. He nodded slowly, without looking at me. Yes. It was me. But why didn't you say anything on the terrace? Afterwards? He turned to me. His eyes in the shadows of the car weren't steel anymore. They were a storm. Because I wanted you to remember it yourself. Or not remember it at all. But I didn't want it to be a debt, or a trick, and all those gifts. The Whitman book, the pralines. They were clues, he admitted. Things you loved, things you truly loved, not the nonsense that idiot made you believe you loved. I wanted to see if the girl from back then still existed under all that cold porcelain you had become wrapped in. His words hit me with the force of a punch. No one had ever seen that contradiction in me. The wild girl in New Orleans inventing stories to save a stranger. And the perfect, restrained woman that New York expected her to be. Why? I repeated the question that had haunted me for weeks. Why all of this? For me? Or for revenge against Julian? He took a deep breath, a profound sound in the quiet of the car. At first, it was for Julian. And for me. Seeing you on that terrace, so furious and so lost. It was like seeing a ghost, the ghost of the girl who gave me courage on a night when I had none. He paused, but then came the gifts. Seeing you wake up. Seeing you remember. That had nothing to do with Julian. The car pulled up in front of my building. He made no move to get out. He just looked at me. And in that gaze, there were 10 years of distance, of memories, and a desire so intense it left me breathless. And now, I managed to say. He leaned in slowly. Not to kiss me, just to get closer. I could feel his breath on my skin, the heat of his body. Now, he whispered, his voice a rough scrape. I am risking ruining everything. Because I no longer want to just be your accomplice in a farce, Vivienne. And that is far more dangerous than any enemy. Before I could answer, before my mind confused by the emotions, the champagne, and the overwhelming discovery could form a coherent thought, he pulled back. Good night, he said. His voice had recovered some of its usual coldness, but not entirely. A crack had opened, and through it, something true was showing. I stumbled out of the car. I went up to my apartment with my heart racing. I took off the red dress, that dress of war, and stood staring out the window at the sleeping city. Dominic Blackwood wasn't a stranger. He was the ghost of my youth, brought back to life with the power and determination of a titan. And he had been watching me, remembering me, all this time. The fear didn't disappear. If anything, it grew. Because now the danger wasn't just a pact with the devil. It was the terrifying, electrifying possibility that the devil had been waiting for me for a decade, and that I, without knowing it, had been waiting for him. The discovery of New Orleans, of that invisible thread linking us across a decade, changed everything and changed nothing. Logistically, everything remained the same. Dominic called me to coordinate schedules. I attended events by his side. We faked a comfort that, little by little, stopped being fake. But between us, a new force field had deployed, charged with unasked questions and answers suspended in the air. We were no longer an actor and his forced accomplice. We were two strangers sharing an ancient secret. And that involuntary, profound intimacy was more destabilizing than any fake kiss. My family, as Dominic predicted, fractured into two clear fronts. My mother, Evelyn, became a fortress of resentment. Her calls were brief and glacial. "Your father and I are having dinner with the Montgomerys on Thursday," she announced one afternoon, without preamble. "It's a business dinner, of course. William wants to explore a merger of portfolios. It would be good if you were there to smooth things over." "I'm not going, Mother," I replied, looking out my apartment window. The firmness in my own voice still surprised me. "I have nothing to smooth over with them. They have things to smooth over with me, and the portfolio merger sounds like a desperate attempt by William to save the furniture now that Dominic has them cornered." A freezing silence on the other end. "You speak like him, like that man. He has brainwashed you, Vivienne. Can't you see he's using you to teach the Montgomerys a lesson? When he's done, he'll spit you out and you'll be left alone." "Better alone than with a liar, Mother," I said and hung up. There was no rage, just an immense exhaustion. Fighting her was draining, but giving in had become impossible. My father, Charles, was a surprise. He invited me to lunch, just the two of us, at a discreet businessmen's club near Wall Street. There were no reproaches. "Your mother is hurt," he said after the first course. "She lives for appearances, and you shattered her display window. But I've made some inquiries about Blackwood." I put my guard up. "He's hard, implacable in business, but his word has value. And his history with the Montgomerys, well, it isn't unprovoked. Years ago, William Montgomery pulled a dirty trick on a very close associate of Dominic's, a man named Nathan Pierce. Almost ruined him. Dominic, who was very young at the time, defended him tooth and nail. Lost a lot of money, but his loyalty never wavered." My father took a sip of wine. "That says something about a man." "And about me?" I asked, searching his eyes. "What does this situation say about me?" He observed me with that calm, calculating look he used to analyze balance sheets. "It says that you finally stopped doing what was expected of you and done what you wanted. Even if the method," a slight smile touched his lips, "was straight out of a soap opera. But the result, sweetheart, is that you rid yourself of a man who wasn't right for you. Julian Montgomery is a climber with more ambition than talent. His family is the same. Dominic Blackwood, on the other hand, is a rival, an adversary of my caliber, and watching him stand up to them is instructive and amusing. It wasn't a blessing, but it was more than I expected. A tacit recognition. I had underestimated him. It was more than I had ever gotten from him. And what if this thing with Dominic? What if it isn't real?" I asked, lowering my voice. "Then you will have had an excellent teacher in the art of social and commercial warfare," he said, shrugging. "And you will emerge stronger." "But, Vivienne," his gaze sharpened. "At the last auction, when he spoke about New Orleans, that wasn't part of any game. I saw it in his eyes. Be careful. Men like him, when they stop playing, they stop for good. And they don't always know how to be gentle." My father's warning echoed a few days later when Dominic announced it was time for me to meet his family. "Your family?" I asked, alarmed. We were in his office. "It's part of the pact. It adds to the verisimilitude," he said, adjusting his shirt cuff. "If we're serious, it's logical. And my grandmother, Constance, is the one who calls the shots. She wants to meet you." The panic was instantaneous. Constance Blackwood was a legend. The matriarch of one of the oldest and most hermetic dynasties in the South, famous for her sharp wit and her disdain for the nouveau riche. The idea of presenting myself to her as her grandson's girlfriend, in the middle of this mess, terrified me. What if she despises me? What if she sees right through our farce? "My grandmother sees through everything," Dominic said, and for the first time I saw a hint of what might be nervousness. "But precisely because of that, if you manage to get her approval, even a little bit, no one else will ever be able to question you. Not even your mother." The Blackwood estate in Charleston wasn't ostentatious. It was powerful. Ancient stone, severe gardens, a silence that spoke of centuries of certainty. Constance received me in a parlor filled with portraits of severe-looking ancestors. She was a petite woman, her back straight as a mast, with perfectly coiffed white hair and black eyes that scanned me up and down in an instant. "So you are the one who managed to get my grandson to smile in the press photographs," she said without offering her hand. Her voice was soft, but with a steel edge. A miracle, truly. "Sit down, my dear." Dinner was a trial by fire. She talked about politics, finance, the lamentable state of modern philanthropy. Dominic, by my side, was unusually quiet, observing. I, armed with my father's advice. Don't fake wisdom. If you don't know, stay quiet. If you know, say something meaningful. Answered just enough with respect, but without submission. I dodged her when she tried to pry about the lamentable incidents with the Montgomerys. Instead, I asked her about a painting on the wall, a southern landscape I recognized as the work of a 19th century regional master. Her black eyes gleamed. "You know about art?" "I studied art history." "That's a William Aiken Walker, isn't it?" "You can tell by the light." She nodded slowly. Then she shifted the conversation to more banal topics, but her attitude had changed. It was no longer an interrogation. It was an observation. At the end of the night, when Dominic went to get the car, I was left alone with her in the grand foyer. She took my hand, her cold, ring-covered fingers squeezing mine with surprising strength. "My Dominic," she said, lowering her voice, "is a man who keeps things inside. Too deep inside. Ever since he was a boy, after what happened to his father." She paused, as if weighing her words. "Years ago, when he came back from a trip to New Orleans, he spoke of a brave girl in a green dress who told a tall tale to save him from a beating. He said she was the most dazzling person he had ever seen." Her black eyes pierced through me. "He never mentioned her again until now. Until you. I don't care how this started. I care how it ends. Do not hurt him, Vivienne. Because if you do, this old woman will make your life impossible. Even if I have to rise from the grave to do it." I didn't have time to answer. Dominic was returning. Constance dropped my hand and recovered her impassive expression. "It has been a lovely evening, my dear. I hope to see you again soon." In the car, I was trembling. The revelation was overwhelming. He had remembered me, not just as a curious detail. He had told his family. "Your grandmother is terrifying," I muttered to break the silence. "She is," he agreed, a hint of pride in his voice. "And what did she tell you?" "Not to hurt you," I replied without being able to help myself. Dominic froze for a second, then let out a short bark of laughter, a rare, genuine sound for him. "That's Constance for you, always protecting the cub, even if the cub already has wolf fangs. And what do you plan to do?" I couldn't get an answer, because the next day, the world fell apart in a completely different way. My mother, in a last-ditch effort to fix things, had invited Julian over for coffee at my parents' house, behind the back of my father, who was out at a meeting. I had gone over to grab some documents I needed from my old bedroom. Passing by the living room, the doors were slightly ajar. I heard their voices. Julian's, sour, whining. "She doesn't understand." I loved her, Evelyn. I truly did. But the pressure, the need to fulfill obligations to the family, you know how it is. My father insisted so much that this alliance with the Kensingtons was key to accessing the state contracts, to Charles's contacts in the energy sector. I just wanted to do it right, to comply. And she is so rigid. One slip-up, one miserable slip-up, and she acts as if I murdered her. I felt a coldness spread from my stomach to the tips of my fingers. I leaned against the wall, not breathing. "It was a mistake, Julian," my mother said, but her voice lacked its former strength. It sounded tired, defeated. "But now, with this man, this Blackwood, it's a dead end. That's what she doesn't see." "That's exactly it," Julian said, his tone turning darker, more confessional. "Blackwood is cannibalizing my family's business, deal by deal. And when he's done with us, what will she have left? A man who only wants her for the knife he plunged into my back. When he gets bored, he'll dump her. And then, Evelyn, then she'll come crawling back, but it will be too late for many things. For her reputation, and for certain business opportunities our fathers had planned. There it was. The naked, disgusting truth. I was nothing more than an alliance, a a key to state contracts and energy contacts. Love and affection had never existed, only ambition and obedience to his father. And my own mother, though hurt, was more concerned about lost business opportunities than about the betrayal of her daughter. I didn't go in. I didn't scream. I turned around and walked out of the house with the documents in my hand, feeling strangely light. The last chain. The last doubt. It had broken. Julian wasn't a man who had made a mistake. He was a coward and a climber. And I had been his prize, his social trophy. The disgust flooded me, but so did an absolute clarity. I would never, ever go back. That night, I went to see Dominic. Not at his office, but at his home, a minimalist penthouse in Tribeca. He opened the door, looking surprised. He was wearing jeans and an unbuttoned dress shirt. He looked more human, more vulnerable. "Vivienne, what's wrong?" I walked in without greeting him. I went to my parents' house. Julian was there with my mother. His expression hardened instantly. "Did he do something to you? Tell me, and I cut him off. I listened to their conversation through the door. I took a deep breath, reciting the truth as if extracting a poison. He chose me because his father told him our alliance was key to the state contracts and my father's contacts. He said I was rigid, that my reaction to his miserable slip-up was exaggerated, and my mother was more worried about losing business opportunities than what he did to me. Dominic said nothing. He stepped closer, and for the first time, his gaze held no calculation or cold evaluation. It held contained, fierce anger but also compassion. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raspy. "Don't be sorry," I retorted, and I noticed my eyes were burning, but I wouldn't cry. "Not for them." I'm relieved. Now I know everything. There is no doubt. He is a scumbag. And I was an idiot. "You weren't an idiot. You were a person who trusted the promises of those who were supposed to protect you," he corrected. He stood perfectly still, just a step away from me. The silence in the room was profound. "And now what do you want to do?" I looked up at him. His grandmother's question resonated in my head. Do not hurt him. And the question I had asked him weeks ago, what am I to you, really? "That depends on you, Dominic," I said, defiant, all my confusion and rage converting into courage because I finally had nothing left to lose with them. "The farce, as you call it, has done its job. I have seen the truth about Julian. My family is what it is. So tell me, now that your game against the Montgomerys is well underway, what am I doing here? Am I still a debt from the past? A piece on your board? Or am I something else to you?" He closed his eyes for an instant, as if the question physically pained him. When he opened them, the mask of the businessman, the impassive strategist, had completely shattered. In his gray eyes, there was only conflict, and something desperately vulnerable. "You are the question I haven't stopped asking myself for 10 years, Vivienne," he confessed, dragging every word out. "You are the reason I never settled for anyone else. You are the ghost that made me keep looking, even when I thought it was impossible. You are." He paused, searching for air, my blind spot, and in my world, blind spots are a luxury I cannot afford. But with you, I don't know how to do anything else. It wasn't an "I love you." It was something better. More real. More terrifying. An acknowledgement of my power over him, of the storm I had unleashed in his orderly life. It wasn't about revenge or strategy anymore. It was about an ancient obsession, a vulnerability that Dominic Blackwood didn't know how to handle. I stepped closer to him. This time, it wasn't an act of desperation or revenge. It was a choice. I placed a hand on his jaw, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Then learn," I whispered. "Because I am no longer the girl in New Orleans who saves strangers, and I am no longer the porcelain doll of the Kensingtons. I am the woman who dragged you into this mess. And I want to know what happens when two people who no longer have anything to fake decide to be real. Even if it hurts. Even if it's terrifying." He captured my hand with his, squeezing it. His gaze was an internal war. "I'm terrified," he admitted, in a whisper so low I almost didn't hear it. "Of ruining it. Of hurting you by accident. Of what? That when you know all the parts of me, you won't want to be here anymore. That's the risk," I said. And I rose up to kiss him. It was a kiss unlike all the others. Slow, exploratory, full of all the unanswered questions and all the promises we didn't yet dare to make. When we pulled apart, panting, his forehead rested against mine. "And now?" he asked, his voice rough with desire. "Now," I replied, feeling a new certainty, born from the chaos, taking root within me. "We stop playing house, and we start writing our own story." With all its consequences, the invitation arrived as a statement, not a question. A thick paper envelope, just like the first one, sitting on my coffee table. Inside, a first-class ticket to New Orleans for Friday, and a handwritten note in Dominic's firm, angular script. "It's time to go back to the beginning. I'll pick up your luggage at 8. Bring a dress, D." A tremor ran through me that wasn't fear. It was anticipation. New Orleans, the French Quarter, the place where it all started, where the girl I once was had invented a story to save a stranger. What was Dominic waiting for? A reconciliation with that ghost? Or simply a picturesque backdrop for our farce turned reality? I called him. "New Orleans?" "Yes." His voice on the other end was calm, but with a new, warmer resonance. "Mardi Gras is starting. It's a good place to let the masks drop. Or are you afraid?" The challenge was evident. "I'm not afraid," I said, sounding more confident than I felt. "But I don't have a vintage dress." "Already taken care of," he replied. "You'll receive it today." "And Vivienne. This is no longer part of the pact. This is something else." He hung up. His words floated in the air of my living room, heavy with a meaning I didn't dare fully decipher. Something else. What? The beginning of something real? Or just a more complex stratagem? The gift arrived 2 hours later. A gown. Not the emerald green of the past. It was a deep indigo blue, almost nocturnal, with tiny silver beadwork and a stunning vintage shawl. It was sober, elegant, and dazzling. It wasn't a costume. It was a declaration, a nod to a past we both shared without having known each other. The flight was quiet but not uncomfortable. Dominic worked on his laptop. I looked out the window as the landscape shifted toward the deep south. Every so often, I felt his gaze on me, a tangible weight that made me turn. His eyes then weren't steel but a softer, inquisitive gray. "Don't look at me like that," I finally said, unable to help myself. "Like what?" he asked, slowly closing his laptop. "Like you're trying to decipher me." "Because I am," he admitted bluntly. The Vivienne on the terrace was pure fury. The one in my office was a cold negotiator. The one sitting here now, I don't know who she is. "Maybe I'm all of them," I replied, turning toward him. "Or maybe none. Maybe we'll find out in New Orleans." The French Quarter during the festival was an assault on the senses. The smell of jasmine, fried beignets, and spicy gumbo. The sound of brass bands bleeding from every corner. The sea of colors, beads, and the golden glow of the street lamps. Dominic didn't take me to a private, exclusive balcony club as I expected. He took me to an old, packed neighborhood joint where the decor wasn't luxurious, but authentic, with faded photographs and rustic chairs. Upon entering, several people greeted him with genuine affection. "Dominic, my boy, it's been too long," yelled an older man with a thick mustache, pulling him into a bear hug. "Uncle Pete," Dominic said, and he smiled. Not the calculated New York smile, but a broad, genuine grin. "I brought someone." Vivienne. All eyes turned to me. Curious, but not hostile. Uncle Pete looked me up and down, his small eyes sparkling. "The girl in the green dress?" he asked, and I saw Dominic nod almost imperceptibly. "By all the saints, you finally found her. Come here, girl, come here. Here we eat, we drink, and we dance." I felt entirely thrown off balance, yet protected, absorbed by a current of human warmth I hadn't known existed. Dominic introduced me to cousins, childhood friends, people who called him by his first name. No titles attached. I drank hurricanes, ate spicy gumbo, and watched Dominic transform. His rigidity melted away. He danced to a jazz band with an octogenarian cousin, clumsy but dedicated, making everyone roar with laughter. "I didn't know you could dance," I told him between laughs when we sat down, breathless. There are a lot of things you don't know about me, he replied, his gaze softening. Things that only come out here. In New York, I am Dominic Blackwood. Here, I am just Dominic, Constance's grandson. The guy who got lost once during Mardi Gras and was rescued by a wonderful liar in a green dress. His confession, spoken like that, in the middle of the noise, touched my soul. He was trying to show me his truth, the truth beneath the businessman, beneath the lone wolf, and I, in turn, felt layers of the carefully constructed Vivienne peeling away. I laughed louder. I had another drink. In a moment of calm, as we walked along the Mississippi River, far from the noise of the French Quarter, I dared to ask, "Why did you really bring me here, Dominic? It wasn't just to show me this." He stopped, watching the lights reflecting on the dark water. "Because I wanted you to see me. The me from before the bespoke suits and boardroom wars. And because I wanted to see you, the girl who wasn't afraid to invent a story to save a stranger. I was afraid she was lost forever." "And?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Did you find her?" He turned to me. The streetlight illuminated half his face. "She's here," he whispered, looking at the indigo blue dress. "She was just scared. Like me. That was when I saw him. Like a specter come to ruin the spell." Julian was on the other side of the promenade, leaning against the railing, watching us. He didn't look like the Manhattan dandy. He was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and an expression of bitterness and rage deformed his features. He had come. He had followed the trail. The fury I felt was instantaneous, but also a cold fear. This was my moment, my fragile, true moment with Dominic, and he was here to dirty it. Dominic followed my gaze. His body, so relaxed a second before, instantly coiled tight. A dark shadow crossed his face. "Stay here," he said, his voice regaining the metallic coldness of New York. "No." I grabbed his arm. "This is my fight too." We walked toward Julian. The festive atmosphere around us seemed to fade, reduced to a distant murmur. "How beautiful." Julian spat when we reached him. He smelled of cheap alcohol and sweat. The lover's getaway. "Paid for with what, Blackwood? With the money you stole from the highway contract?" "Leave, Julian," I said, before Dominic could speak. "You have no business here." "Oh, no." His laugh was an ugly sound. "I think I do. I've been doing my homework, Vivienne. Asking around. Your new boyfriend isn't as clean as he looks. He has skeletons in the closet. Lots of them. And when you find out, you'll come running back to me. You're drunk, and you're pathetic," I said. But a seed of doubt, planted by his words, began to sprout inside me. Dominic took a step forward, placing himself between Julian and me. He didn't say anything, he just looked at him. And that look, filled with such absolute contempt, was more terrifying than any scream. Julian stepped back, but his rage gave him one last push. "Ask him about the shell companies in the Cayman Islands," he yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Dominic. "Ask him how he secured the harbor concession. He's not the Prince Charming he paints himself to be. He's a shark, and when he's done devouring my family, he'll devour yours." Dominic moved. It was fast, silent. He grabbed Julian by the lapels of his shirt and slammed him against the iron railing of the Riverwalk with a contained force that made the metal groan. "Listen to me very carefully, Montgomery," he said. His voice was a mere thread, but loaded with a threat so lethal it froze my blood. "You had your warning. This is the last one. If you ever come near her again, if you say one more word to her, I won't just ruin you. I will make you disappear from New York, from the country, and not through legal means. Do you understand me? Now get out of my sight before I forget we are in public." He released Julian, who stumbled, panting, his face pale with pure fear. He looked at Dominic, then at me, with hatred, but also with the final recognition of his defeat. He spat on the ground, an ugly stain on the joy of the festival, and walked away, stumbling into the crowd. The tension didn't dissipate. Dominic remained rigid, breathing deeply, his fists still clenched. I was trembling, not out of fear of Julian, but because of the latent violence I had seen in Dominic. Because of the accusations echoing in my head. Shark. Shell companies. Skeletons. Is it true? I asked, my voice shaking. What he said? He turned slowly. The fury still burned in his eyes, but as he looked at me, it dimmed a little, replaced by something more complex. Pain. Disappointment. Do you think it is? He asked, his tone flat. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know you. Not really. And that scares you, he concluded. He made a gesture of exhaustion, running a hand over his face. You're right. I am a shark. I have done things in business that I am not proud of. I have fought tooth and nail for what is mine. But what I am doing to Julian is justice. His family destroyed lives to enrich themselves. I am just making them pay the bill. And I would never lie to you about who I am or what I do. He was giving me a half-truth. I could feel it. But he was also giving me a choice. I could keep asking, keep digging up the bones Julian had mentioned. Or I could believe in the man who had brought me to New Orleans, who had shown me his unpolished heart. The music of a jazz band played louder from a nearby club. The smell of jasmine filled the air again. Dominic watched me, waiting, vulnerable in a way he had never been. He had risked showing me his soft side, and Julian had come to remind him, and me, that the outside world, harsh and full of enemies, still existed. I took a step toward him, then another. I placed my hands on his chest, over his heart, which was beating fast and hard. I don't want to know, I whispered. Not now. Not tonight. Tonight, I just want to know the Dominic who dances clumsily, and who was saved by a liar in a green dress. The tension in his body shattered. A deep sigh, almost a sob, escaped his lips. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my neck. The contact was pure electricity, need, and relief. You are the only real thing I have, he murmured against my skin, and his words pierced me. The only thing that isn't calculated, that isn't a strategy, and it terrifies me. I lifted my head to look at him. Fireworks began to burst in the sky over the river, illuminating his face with flashes of color. I'm scared too, I confessed. But I'm more scared of going backward. And then, amid the roar of the gunpowder and the smell of sulfur, beneath a sky filled with ephemeral light, he lowered his head and kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of unleashed passion, nor of revenge. It was a kiss of surrender, of a promise, of an uncertain future freely chosen. A kiss that tasted of bourbon, jasmine, and truth. A kiss that, for the first time, wasn't part of any pact. It was ours. When we pulled apart, breathless, the world had changed. Julian, his threats, the skeletons in the closet, everything was still there, lurking. But in that moment, under the New Orleans sky, there was only Dominic and Vivienne, and that, for now, was enough. It was more than either of us had ever had, and it was as fragile as the fireworks fading into the dark. The return to New York was a journey steeped in a different kind of silence, not the uncomfortable quiet of before, but one saturated with the taste of the kiss under the fireworks and the venomous echo of Julian's words. Shark. Shell companies. Skeletons. They had lodged in a corner of my mind like a thorn I couldn't extract. Dominic, beside me on the plane, seemed more relaxed than ever, his fingers laced with mine over the armrest. It was a possessive gesture, but also tender. He had crossed a line, shown vulnerability, and I had accepted it. But now, in the harsh morning light, doubt crept in. What are you thinking about? He asked without opening his eyes, as if he could feel the vibration of my thoughts. Nothing. I lied. You lie badly, he murmured, a half smile on his lips. It's Julian. Isn't it? His words. I went still. It was useless to pretend with him. Are they lies? I asked, staring out the window at the clouds. Depends on what you believe the truth is, he replied, opening his eyes. His gaze was clear and gray. Did you think I built what I have by handing out hugs and kisses, Vivienne? The business world, especially in Manhattan, is a jungle. I've had to be harder, smarter, and sometimes more ruthless than the rest to survive, to protect what's mine and my people. And the Cayman Islands? I pressed, turning toward him. He sighed. Yes, I have a holding company there, just like half the massive fortunes in this country. It's legal. It's to protect assets, not to hide corpses. As for the harbor, he paused, choosing his words. It was a tough bidding war. I won. The ones who lost, like the Montgomery Consortium, spread rumors. That's the price of winning. It sounded logical, reasonable. But there was a vagueness in his eyes that didn't fully convince me. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling the whole truth either. It was as if he were giving me the pieces of a puzzle, but not the complete picture. What if I told you I need to believe you? I said, my voice low. He squeezed my hand. Then believe in me. In what we have here, now. Not in the ghosts Julian wants to raise. I decided to try, to believe. For a week, it was easy. Dominic was different, more present, more human. The business calls during dinner decreased. He spent entire evenings at my apartment, reading while I worked on a cataloging project for the gallery. He even cooked for me once a disastrous but sincere attempt at making gumbo, which we ate laughing on the living room floor. It was a side of him I didn't know, one that made me forget the Man of Steel on Park Avenue. Until the call came from my father. Vivienne, I need to see you in the office. Now. His tone was strange. Tense. It wasn't the voice of the pragmatic father. It was the voice of Charles Kensington standing on the edge of a precipice. In my father's office, on the executive floor overlooking Fifth Avenue, the air smelled of expensive cigars and impending disaster. My father was pale. What's wrong, Dad? How much do you know about Blackwood's businesses? He asked, without preamble. Enough, I replied, frowning. Why? Because the company is under attack. A hostile takeover. Someone is aggressively buying up shares through a network of shell companies. The stock is tanking, the banks are calling, nervous. A chill ran down my spine. And what does Dominic have to do with that? My father slid a folder across the desk. Inside were financial reports, graphs with red arrows pointing straight down, and names. Corporations headquartered in Luxembourg, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. One of them, Cayman Equity Partners Limited, was underlined in red. This one, my father said, tapping the name with his finger. This is the one leading the aggressive buyout, and according to my contacts, it's linked to a larger holding firm, Blackwood Global Investments. The world stopped. The noise from the street below vanished. Blackwood Global Investments, Dominic's parent company. No. It can't be, I managed to say. But my voice sounded weak, distant. He wouldn't. He has nothing to gain from ruining us. It's not about ruining us, sweetie, my father said bitterly. It's about buying us cheap. Swallowing Kensington Construction for a fraction of its value. It would be a masterstroke. And your relationship with him made us lower our guard. It made me lower my guard. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. Was this the real game? Julian wasn't the target. My own family was. He had used my pain, my rage, my growing affection for him, to get close to his prey. The pieces fit in a horrible, logical way. The kiss on the terrace gave him the perfect excuse to approach me. Protecting me against Julian gave him access, information, trust. And all this time, while I was melting for the man who remembered my green dress, he was planning my father's downfall. I have to go, I said, jumping to my feet, my legs trembling. Vivienne, wait, don't do anything rash, I yelled, and the raw pain in my voice surprised even me. Dad. I might have just handed him the company on a silver platter because I was stupid enough to believe in fairy tales. I ran out of the office. I didn't go to confront Dominic. Not yet. First, I needed proof. I needed to understand. I went to my apartment and opened my laptop with shaking hands. I started searching. Cayman Equity Partners Limited. News, registries, anything. The results were scarce, opaque. Anonymous LLCs, directors with generic names. But on a specialized finance forum, an anonymous comment from months ago spoke of an aggressive cleanup in the construction sector by a major New York shark. It mentioned Kensington Construction as a possible target, and then, the phrase that froze my blood, the oldest trick in the book, get close to the daughter to get to the father. It wasn't definitive proof. It was a suspicion, a rumor, but it resonated too well with my terror. Zoe, when I called her in hysterics, tried to calm me down. Vivi, think. Dominic has 1,000 ways to do business. Why would he use something so personal, so risky? It's like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. Unless the fly isn't the target, I cried, sitting on the kitchen floor. Unless the target is to prove he can do it, that he can break me and my family just because he can. I spent 2 days in a state of paralysis and paranoia. Dominic called. I didn't answer. He sent texts. Is everything okay? Is something wrong? I ignored them. Was it genuine concern, or the calculation of a man sensing his pawn slipping away? The doubt was an acid eating me from the inside. On the third night, I decided to confront him. I couldn't live like this. I took a cab to his penthouse. I went up with my heart in my throat. He opened the door. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, a shadow of stubble on his jaw. Seeing me, his eyes showed relief. Then, worry. Vivian, where the hell have you been? I've been planning the acquisition of Kensington Construction. I cut in, walking past him and letting the door slam shut behind me. He froze. All expression vanished from his face, leaving only an impassive mask. It was that lack of immediate reaction, that instant of pure control, that hurt the most. It was the gaze of the strategist, not the man who had shared gumbo on the floor. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice calm, too calm. Cayman Equity Partners. The aggressive stock buyouts. Blackwood Global Investments. I walked toward him, shaking with rage and heartbreak. Was this the plan all along, Dominic? Get close to the idiot daughter to get to the father? Make me believe you. You felt something for me, while you sank my family's legacy? He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was something there, not guilt, but a profound, almost painful frustration. It's not what you think, he said firmly. Then tell me what it is, I screamed. Because the proof is there. Your company is behind it. Julian was right. You are a shark, and I've been your bait. Julian is manipulating you, he roared, losing his composure for the first time. He grabbed my arms not tightly, but with a desperate urgency. Of course my company is buying shares. But not to sink your father. It's a defensive maneuver, Vivienne. Someone else is trying to absorb Kensington. Someone using shell companies in the Caymans to hide. I am buying to block them. To keep control in your family's hands until we can identify the real attacker. I am trying to protect you. I stared at him, jaw slack. His words were a complete twist. It could be true. He could be on my family's side. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, my rage giving way to an even more painful confusion. Because I couldn't, he said, letting me go and turning away, running a hand through his hair. The information is delicate. If it leaks, the attacker would change strategy. And besides, he turned back, his face marked by anguish. I didn't want you to think exactly what you're thinking right now, that you would close off, that you would see me as the enemy. I was stupid. I thought I could control everything, protect you from everything, without having to tell you every single move. It was credible, too credible, and it fit the Dominic I knew, controlling, protective, acting in the shadows. But it also fit the Machiavellian Dominic my fear had constructed. Who should I believe? I need proof, I said, my voice weak. I can't just go on your word. He nodded slowly. I'll give it to you tomorrow. I'll show you the reports, the movements, everything. But I need you to trust me until then. Please, Vivienne. The plea in his voice disarmed me. I had never heard him plead. I nodded, lacking the strength to speak. I felt exhausted. Destroyed inside. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. I needed space. I needed to think. I'll take you home, he offered, his voice hollow. No, I'll take a cab. I walked through the silent streets of Tribeca. The cold night air couldn't clear my mind. Dominic's words and my father's words tangled in my head. Protection or betrayal. Was I the idiot who believed in the wrong man? Or the paranoid woman destroying the only good thing she had? The next day, the proof arrived in the most brutal way possible. I was driving my car, a small, reliable sedan, down Park Avenue toward the gallery. The mid-morning traffic was heavy. As I pressed the brake pedal to stop at a red light, it went all the way to the floor. Soft. No resistance. Just a screeching metallic noise. The car didn't slow down. Panic seized me. I yanked the emergency brake hard, the rear wheels locking and skidding. I wrenched the steering wheel to the right, toward a less crowded side street. The car hopped the curb with a sickening crunch, slamming head-on into a lamppost. The airbags deployed. I sat there, trembling violently, my hands clutching the wheel. The smell of burnt rubber and smoke filled the air. Pedestrians rushed over, knocking on the window. "Miss, are you okay?" I nodded mechanically, unable to speak. The brakes. The brakes had failed. On a car that was regularly serviced. A failure that was far too convenient. My first, visceral, blinding thought was Dominic. He knew I was investigating. He knew I doubted him. He had decided to silence me. This was the dark side of the shark. The terror paralyzed me more than the crash itself. As I sat on the curb with a blanket a kind stranger had given me, waiting for the tow truck, my phone rang. An unknown number. With shaking hands, I answered. "Hello?" A distorted, metallic voice, like it was being run through a filter, spoke on the other end. "Vivienne Kensington." "Yes." "Who is this?" "Listen carefully. Today's accident was not an accident." My blood ran cold. "Brakes don't just fail like that. And it wasn't the work of your ex. Julian is a puppet. He's just the tip of the iceberg." "Who are you?" I stammered. "Someone who knows the truth. Dominic Blackwood isn't your savior, but he isn't the one trying to kill you either. It's more complicated. The one who wants you out of the game is closer than you think. Much closer." The voice paused, then added, each word dripping with venom, "Don't trust anyone. And above all, don't trust the ones who say they love you. Sometimes, betrayal carries the exact same blood." The call disconnected. I stared at my phone, the world spinning around me. Not Julian. Not Dominic. Closer than you think. The same blood. I looked at my wrecked car, the symbol of my life shattering into pieces. Then I looked at my phone, where Dominic's name was now flashing on the screen. A missed call followed by a text. "Vivienne, I heard about the car. Where are you? I'm coming." Was he coming to help me? Or to finish the job? The anonymous voice echoed in my head. "Don't trust anyone." I stood up, letting the blanket drop to the pavement. The fear had transformed into something colder, harder. A fierce determination. I was no longer the girl on the terrace full of rage and desperation, nor the woman in love in New Orleans willing to believe a fairy tale. I was someone they had just tried to kill, and whoever it was, wherever they were, I was going to find them, and when I did, I was going to make sure they paid. With Dominic, with Julian, with my family, or with whoever it took. The game had changed, and now, I would play to kill, too. The hospital waiting room smelled of disinfectant and fear. My hands were shaking, not from the shock of the accident, but from the anonymous call echoing in my head like a cursed loop. "Closer than you think. The same blood. The doctor said it was a miracle I only had scratches and a severe shock. The brakes had indeed been sabotaged. A clean, professional cut to the hydraulic line. Someone wanted me to crash at high speed. Dominic arrived like a hurricane, practically tearing the waiting room door off its hinges. His face, normally an impassive mask, was pale with raw terror. Upon seeing me sitting there, intact, a wave of visceral relief crashed over him so hard he stumbled for a fraction of a second. "Vivienne. God." His voice was hoarse, broken. He crossed the distance in 2 strides. His hands reached out as if to touch me, but stopped midair, trembling. "Are you okay?" "I'm alive," I said. The sound of my own voice surprised me. It was cold, flat. The fear had solidified into something hard and sharp inside me. Someone didn't want me to be. He knelt in front of me, forcing me to look at him. His gray eyes searched mine, looking past the scrapes on my forehead. Who? Tell me what you know, what you suspect. I swear on everything I love, I will destroy them. There was authentic rage in him, a promise of violence that was not mere rhetoric. And for a second, a tempting, terrible second, I wanted to sink into that certainty, to let him take charge, to let him be my shield and my sword. But the anonymous words pierced me like ice needles. Don't trust anyone. I don't know who it was. I lied, looking him dead in the eye without blinking. But it wasn't Julian. He doesn't have the guts, and this method is too definitive for him. Dominic nodded, his mind already racing. You're right. Julian is a coward. This is another league, someone who doesn't want anonymous lawyer letters, someone who wants a final result. His expression hardened even more. You need to come to my home right now. It's the only way I can ensure you're safe. No, I said, standing up. I swayed a little, and his hand locked around my arm to steady me. The electricity of his touch was immediate, intense, but I pulled away. No, I can't. He stood up, confused. What? Vivienne? This isn't a game. Someone just tried to kill you. It could have been anyone. Exactly, I exploded, the tension finally snapping. Including you. Your company is buying my father's stock. You lied to me. And now this. How do you expect me to trust you? How do I know this isn't part of your defensive maneuver to scare me into locking myself away with you? Far from the truth? My words dropped between us like bombs. I watched each one strike him. I watched the light of worry in his eyes extinguish, replaced first by disbelief, then by a pain so profound I almost stepped back. You think I had something to do with this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, heavy with disbelief. That I would put you in danger? After New Orleans? After everything? I don't know what to believe, Dominic, I yelled, tears of frustration and fear finally spilling over. Everything is a maze. Your company. The Caymans. The attack on my father. And now this. Someone called me after the crash. A distorted voice. They said the person who wants to hurt me is closer than I think. That the betrayal carries the same blood. He froze. All color drained from his face. A call? What else did they say? A number? Anything? Nothing, just that. And then they hung up. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control. So no, I am not going with you. I need to think. I need to understand who wants me dead. And I can't do that if I'm under your roof, wondering if every gesture you make is just another lie. For a long, terrible moment, I thought he might break, that the anger would win out. Instead, he did something worse. He calmed down. A glacial, lethal calm descended over him. He was the Dominic Blackwood who dismantled empires, the ruthless strategist. Agreed, he said, his tone absolute zero. Don't come with me, but do not stay alone. Go to your father's house. With private security which I will provide. Men I trust with my life. Do not argue with me on this, Vivienne. It is non-negotiable. And why would I trust your men? I challenged. Because if I wanted you dead, darling, he said. And the endearment sounded like a threat, you already would be. And it wouldn't be something as sloppy as cutting brake lines. It would be fast, clean, and untraceable. This is amateurish. Emotional. Someone who is not a professional but who is desperate. And that person is in your circle. I am going to find them. With or without your help. He turned his back and walked away, his tall, rigid figure disappearing down the hospital corridor. He left me trembling with a knot of contradictory emotions in my throat. Had I been too harsh? Or not harsh enough? I went to my parents' townhouse on the Upper East Side, as he suggested, though I rejected his security team. I hired a different firm, paying them with my own savings. I wasn't going to owe him anything else. My father received me with open arms, his face marked by worry and guilt. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," he said, hugging me tightly. "I've been an idiot. I've been so worried about the company that I didn't see the real danger. You'll be safe here." My mother, Evelyn, was unusually quiet. Her habitual disapproval had been replaced by a pale, genuine fear. She even poured me chamomile tea with her own hands, a gesture so unusual it moved me, despite everything. But the phrase, "the same blood," kept ringing in my head. I observed my parents, the household staff who had been there for years, and a horrible suspicion began to take shape. Not my parents. They could be cold, distant, but not murderers. But there was someone else. Someone who had always been there in the margins. Kind, solicitous, but with a lot to gain if my father fell. My Uncle Edward. My father's younger brother. The amicable and slightly useless vice president of Kensington Construction. Always in his older brother's shadow. Always lamenting that he didn't have the magic touch for business. Edward, who had sent me flowers when I broke up with Julian. Edward, who always said I was the brains of the family. Edward, whose own side ventures, as I knew from hushed dinner table gossip, weren't doing too well. The night of the accident, he was having dinner with us. He had been particularly interested in the Blackwood situation, asking with fake innocence about the stock movements. Too much coincidence. I decided to investigate. I couldn't trust Dominic, nor the police. My father had filed a report, but without hard proof, it was a dead end. I had to do it myself. I used my contacts in the art world, discreet people who knew how to find information, and I started digging through the old archives at the house, pretending I wanted to organize my father's old files. I found something one afternoon while my parents were out. A folder hidden behind some outdated accounting ledgers, contracts, blurry bank transfers, and a recurring name, E. Kensington Holdings, LLC, my uncle's company. There were massive transfers from years ago to an account in Panama, and more recently, communications with a shady law firm notorious for hostile takeovers and money laundering. One of their regular clients, according to a margin note written by my father with 3 exclamation points, was the consortium that had been trying to buy Kensington Construction. The same consortium Dominic claimed to be blocking. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a thread, and as I pulled on it, everything began to unravel. An anonymous call to my private investigator confirmed that Edward had been meeting secretly with Julian Montgomery weeks ago. Julian, desperate for money and revenge, had found an ally inside the family. My ambitious, resentful uncle. The night I confronted him was almost anticlimactic. I invited him to dinner, just the two of us, in the townhouse's conservatory. He was nervous, drinking more wine than usual. "It's so good to spend time with your old uncle, Vivienne," he said with his usual benevolent smile, but his eyes kept darting around. "With all this terrible mess, the car. Thank God it wasn't worse." "Yes, thank God," I said, placing my fork on the plate with a soft clink. Though it was strange, wasn't it? Such a personal sabotage, as if someone knew my movements. My routine. He paled slightly. "Well, the city is full of bad people. And with that Blackwood character mixed up in your life." "Ah, yes, Dominic," I said, watching him like a hawk. "Strange, isn't it? That right when his company started buying shares to protect Dad, someone tries to kill me, almost as if someone wanted to deflect suspicion onto him. Create chaos, make Dad turn against his only real ally, while the true enemy acted from the inside." Edward set his glass down. "I don't know what you're referring to, niece. You're very upset. It's understandable after the shock." "What upsets me, Uncle," I said, standing up, my voice cold as steel, "is betrayal. Seeing papers I wasn't supposed to see, transfers to Panama, secret meetings with Julian Montgomery, contacts with law firms that help devour family businesses." His mask cracked. The benevolent smile vanished, replaced by a grimace of fear and spite. "You don't understand anything," he spat, standing up as well. "Your father always had everything. The company, the respect, the fame. I was just the little brother, the one who cleaned up his mistakes. And when I finally saw my chance, when that idiot Montgomery approached me with a plan to force your father out and split the pie, you had to go and get involved with that monster Blackwood. You ruined everything." He started snooping around, blocking the buyouts. "You had to be taken out of the picture. You were the weak link. Every word was a confirmation, a dagger. I didn't feel rage. I felt a profound coldness, an absolute contempt. And cutting my brakes? Was that your idea or Julian's? It was an accident, he yelled, beside himself. We just wanted to scare you, to make you stop seeing Blackwood, to make you go back to Julian so everything could go back to the plan. The mechanic said it would only fail going downhill, that it would just be a scare, a scare. My life, reduced to a scare to save his petty, greedy scheme. At that moment, the conservatory doors swung open. Dominic stood there, flanked by two of his security men. And behind him, my father, his face contorted with horror and fury. They had heard everything. Dominic had followed Edward's trail on his own, arriving at the exact same conclusions, and had brought my father here for the final confrontation. Brother, my father said, his voice shaking with a contained wrath I had never heard from him. Get out of my house. Now. The lawyers and the police will deal with you. Edward collapsed, suddenly transforming into a broken old man begging, crying. They dragged him out. My father walked over and hugged me fiercely. I am so sorry, my daughter. I am so sorry. To the depths of my soul. Over his shoulder, my eyes met Dominic's. He was standing in the doorway. His expression was inscrutable. He had come. He had brought the truth, and he had done it without asking for anything in return. Even after the way I had treated him at the hospital, when my father stepped out, overwhelmed, to call his lawyer, Dominic and I were left alone in the conservatory, surrounded by the wreckage of betrayal. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because when someone wants to hurt you, he said, stepping closer slowly, you start by ruling out the obvious suspects. Julian was too stupid and cowardly for something like this. He paused. You already know what I am capable of. But I would never hurt you. That left the inner circle. And your uncle was always envious. And gambling debts don't pay themselves. The anonymous call. Was that you? I asked, remembering the distorted voice. He shook his head. That was Nathan Pierce. The friend the Montgomerys ruined. He has contacts in the underworld. He heard rumors that a mechanic was hired for a dirty job involving your family. He didn't know the details, but he wanted to warn you. He didn't trust me enough to call me directly. Everything fit. The complete picture. Horrible and clear. I stepped toward him. There was no more room for doubts, for fear. Only the raw, terrible truth. At the hospital, I said terrible things to you. I accused you. You were terrified. He interrupted, raising a hand to touch my cheek, but stopping inches away. And I had given you reasons to distrust me. I lied to you by omission. I thought I was protecting you. I only succeeded in pushing you away. And the shares? Were you really helping my father? Yes, he affirmed without hesitation. Your uncle and his allies wanted to force a fire sale. I bought shares to keep the price high and control within the family, to give you and your father time to find the leak. It was a risky move. It could have looked hostile. It did, I said, and a tear, the first of many, slipped down my cheek. He finally closed the distance, his thumb wiping the tear away with a tenderness that tore at my chest. I love you, Vivian, he whispered, and the simple, direct words echoed in the quiet conservatory with more force than any grand declaration. Ever since that night in New Orleans. And everything I have done, however, clumsy, brutal, or misguided it seemed, has been to get to you. To protect you. To clear the path to you. And I would do it again, even if it meant you hating me for it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I collapsed against him, burying my face in his chest, sobbing from fear, from betrayal, from relief, from the overwhelming certainty of his words. He wrapped his arms around me, strong, secure, anchoring me in the hurricane. I love you too. I confessed through my tears, the truth rising to the surface after so much time. And I'm terrified of you, and I don't want a life of shadows and lies. You won't have one, he promised, his mouth against my hair. The shadows are there, they always will be. But from now on, we face them together. With the truth up front. Always. It was an impossible promise in the world we lived in. But in that moment, Among the ruins of family betrayal and the heat of his embrace, it was the only truth I wanted to believe. The mask of the shark had fallen, revealing the wounded, fiercely loyal man underneath. And my mask, the society girl, the victim, the pawn, had also shattered. What remained was something else. Something stronger. Something more dangerous. Something ours. The silence that followed Edward's downfall was unlike any other. It wasn't uncomfortable or heavy with secrets. It was a silence of exhaustion, scorched earth after a forest fire. My father aged 10 years in a single night. Evelyn, for once, was speechless. The betrayal had come from inside her own house, from the family she fought so hard to present as flawless. The scandal was contained with an iron grip. Health problems, and an immediate retirement for my uncle, along with the quiet restitution of stolen funds under threat of legal action. Dominic pulled the strings with ruthless, discreet efficiency. There was no public trial, but Edward vanished from our lives as if he had never existed. Amidst the ruins, I found myself strangely serene. The fear that had paralyzed me had mutated. It was no longer a fear of the unknown, of the shadows. It was a cold, clear respect for the malice people could harbor, even behind a familiar smile. And alongside that respect rose a determination made of steel. I went to see Dominic at his Park Avenue office a week later. He was behind his desk, but stood up as soon as I entered. There was a new caution in his eyes, a vulnerability he didn't try to hide. The man who knew everything, who controlled everything, had been wounded by my distrust, and now he waited, without certainties. "You look well," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I feel well," I replied. And it was true. I felt clear. I felt like myself. I came to talk. To really talk. No pacts, no strategies. He nodded and pointed to the armchairs by the window, not the opposite side of his imposing desk. A small but significant gesture. We sat down as equals. First of all, I began, looking at him directly. "Thank you. For not giving up. For continuing to look for the truth even when I turned my back on you. For bringing my father that night. You saved him. You saved the company. I didn't do it for your father," he said bluntly. "I did it for you, so you would stop looking at me like the enemy. I know, and that makes it more important." I took a deep breath. "Second, I need time." I saw a flash of pain in his eyes, quickly masked. "Time. Yes. Not to get away from you, to get closer to myself. Throughout this entire madness, I have been a pawn. Julian's pawn. My family's pawn. Even a pawn in your game. Even if it was for my benefit. The Vivienne who kissed a stranger on a terrace was broken. The one sitting here now needs to know who she is when she isn't defined by a scandal, by a revenge plot, or by a man." He studied me for a long moment, then slowly broke into a smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph or relief. It was admiration. "That is the most sensible thing you've ever said," he conceded. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to actually work at Kensington Construction, not as the owner's daughter who signs papers, but for real. My father needs it, and I need to build something that is mine, with my rules." "And us?" he asked, the tension barely perceptible in his voice. "And us," I confirmed. "But differently. I need you to promise me something, Dominic. No more half-truths. No more protecting me from reality, however harsh it may be. If we are a team, we are a team in everything, in the light and in the shadows. But we make the decisions together." He extended his hand across the small table, palm up. "An offer, not a demand. I promise. I swear I will never underestimate you again by thinking I know what's best for you. You are, without a doubt, the most capable person I know." I placed my hand in his. The contact was an oath, and I swear never to doubt your loyalty at the first sign of trouble. Even if your methods still terrify me a little, they will always terrify you a little, he said with a hint of his old irony. They terrify me sometimes too. But it's who I am. And it's part of why I love you, I said. The words sounded simple and absolute. The months that followed were the most intense of my life. I immersed myself in Kensington construction. I learned about concrete and zoning permits, labor unions and budgets. I fired my uncle's accomplices with a coldness I had learned from Dominic. I negotiated with the banks with my head held high and the numbers clear. My father, skeptical at first, soon became my strongest ally. Even my mother, seeing the firmness with which I picked up the pieces of her world, started to look at me with something resembling respect, though she would never admit it. Dominic was by my side, but not in front of me. He was a counselor, a support system in the shadows. His calls were no longer to coordinate social agendas, but to ask, "How did the meeting with the contractor go?" Or, "Do you need me to make a call to that obstructionist city councilman?" Sometimes we debated strategy until the early hours of the morning in my loft or his penthouse, surrounded by blueprints and cold coffee. The passion that was once purely emotional or sexual had channeled into this as well, building something together, from the truth. Our public relationship stopped being a spectacle. We stopped appearing in all the tabloids. We attended events together when we wanted to, not when it was convenient. People whispered that the romance had cooled off. We knew that, on the contrary, it had fused into something more solid. Less photogenic, but indestructible. Julian Montgomery, exactly as Dominic predicted, disappeared. His family was discredited and financially ruined after the Edwards scandal, which Dominic ensured was quietly known in the right circles without formally implicating them. Julian sold what was left and moved to Miami, a mediocre ending for such massive ambition. A year later, almost on the exact anniversary of the kiss on the terrace, Dominic proposed we return to New Orleans, to Mardi Gras. Not as an escape, but as a celebration. "Aren't you afraid of ghosts?" I asked him, smiling, as I packed a new cocktail dress this time, a sunny, vibrant yellow. "The only ghosts are the ones we leave behind," he replied. "And ours, Vivienne, are finally at peace." The festival was different this time. There were no dramatic discoveries or threats in the dark. It was simple joy. We danced to brass bands until our feet hurt. We drank hurricanes with his cousins. We laughed with Uncle Pete, who still called me the savior. In a moment of calm, walking through the French Quarter beneath the glow of the gas lamps, Dominic stopped. "I brought you here with an ulterior motive," he said. His tone was strangely formal. "Oh God," I sighed, joking. "Another dramatic confession." "Something like that," he said, turning to face me. He didn't kneel. He didn't pull a velvet box from his pocket. He took both my hands and looked me in the eyes with that intensity that could still paralyze me. "Vivienne Kensington, you have owned my soul since you were 18 and told a story to save my life. You have taught me what courage, truth, and loyalty really look like. I do not want to spend another day of my life without knowing that you are mine and I am yours. Before the world, and before ourselves." He paused, swallowing hard. The most powerful man I knew was nervous. "I am not asking you to be my wife as a deal, or as a strategy. I am asking you as the greatest act of faith and love I can conceive. Will you marry me?" There were no fireworks at that exact moment. Only the distant murmur of the street party, the smell of jasmine, and the absolute truth in his eyes. It wasn't a fairy tale proposal. It was a proposal of life, of that complicated, sometimes shadowy, but entirely authentic and shared life we had begun to build. I smiled, feeling a profound, tranquil happiness earned the hard way, filling every corner of my being. "Yes, Dominic Blackwood," I said. "I will marry you, but on one condition." "Whatever it is," he replied, a flash of his old anxiety crossing his face. "That our honeymoon is somewhere without a single bead, mask, or jazz band. I am completely exhausted by festivals." He let out a loud laugh, a free, joyous sound that drew the smiles of passers-by. He pulled me to him and kissed me. A kiss that tasted of the future, of bourbon, and of a home found in the most unexpected place. The wedding took place 6 months later at the Blackwood family estate in South Carolina. Constance presided over the ceremony with a smile of absolute triumph. My father walked me down the aisle with tears of pride in his eyes. My mother, though she would never admit she was happy, wore a spectacular designer hat. Zoe was my maid of honor. It wasn't the magazine cover wedding my mother had always dreamed of. It was better. It was ours. When the reception ended, in the early hours of the morning, Dominic and I slipped away to walk through the gardens. The southern night air was warm and perfumed. Happy, husband? I asked, resting my head on his shoulder. More than I deserve, he whispered, wrapping his arm around me. And you, wife? Do you think it was worth it? All the pain, the scandal, the fear. I looked back at the dizzying year that had turned a broken woman into the master of her own destiny. I remembered the humiliation on the terrace, the desperation of the pact, the discovery in New Orleans, the betrayal of my own blood, the terror of the crashing car, and the slow, painful reconstruction. I paid a very high price for a betrayal, I said quietly, almost to myself. But fate or chance, or that brave girl in the green dress paid me back in spades. It didn't just give me love, Dominic, it gave me back to myself, and that is priceless. He kissed me again, a soft, promising kiss beneath the starry southern sky. The road hadn't been easy, nor would it be, but now for the first time I was holding the map, and walking beside me was a wolf who had chosen to be my partner, not my master. The game was over. Life, our real, complicated, and extraordinary life had just begun.